For a long time, Order of the Phoenix was my favourite Harry Potter movie. It has that anti-authoritarian stance on education, Imelda Staunton produces one of the greatest performances in the series, and the final fight sequence at the end is just fucking amazing. The book, however, tells an almost completely different story, and there's plenty of information to pick out and analyse with regards to the 5th Harry Potter instalment. My experience with the book was a struggled one, in that I felt it was just too damn long. 766 pages later, and I feel this has to be the weakest of the books so far. Before you get all angry in the comments section, I have yet to read Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows, and my judgment of those novels will come when I review those installments alongside the films. As this review progresses, I will outline exactly what was great and what sucked about both the novel and film, so you can get a better understanding of why I feel the way I do about this story. I advise you check out my previous reviews so you can get some perspective on where I stand with the series, so without further ado, let's slice up this fantasy epic and analyse the goods, bads and uglies of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. As a precursor, I'm going to justify why I may be more lenient on the changes that were made in the film adaptation of Order of the Phoenix compared to those of Goblet of Fire. Some may argue I was very harsh on Goblet of Fire due to it being practically impossible to condense a 636-page novel into a 2.5-hour film, but the time the filmmakers had was not used to their advantage in producing a faithful adaptation. Order of the Phoenix, however, despite it being the shortest Harry Potter film aside from Deathly Hallows 2, was actually intended to be a full 3-hour film. This becomes very interesting when, to me, I consider the Order of the Phoenix film feels a lot more like an adaptation that just cut out all of the dreary, boring segments of the book. Granted, there are a few very important parts of the story that the film left out, but I will cover those within this review. I'm unsure if this was down to the change of scriptwriter for the film, as this is the only Harry Potter film that was written by somebody other than Steve Kloves, Michael Goldenberg. Apparently this guy had been aching for an opportunity to write a Harry Potter script for years, but Kloves was always chosen instead. I'm not saying Kloves did a bad job on the earlier films he wrote. Granted, there are a considerable amount of questionable dialogue choices within those scripts too, but I think that whoever made the decision for Goldenberg to write this script was a good one, as I felt a new breath of fresh air was good for the series in terms of its writing. I presume the production company and distributors didn't allow the full version to be made, despite the amount of work Yates put into it. I personally would love to have seen a longer version of the Order of the Phoenix, but at least he tried, and that's what matters. Right. Let's fucking do this. The book opens slightly before this scene we see in the playground, where Harry urgently listens to radios and TV broadcasts for any updates on the revival of Voldemort. He doesn't hear much, but the Dursleys find his obsession rather queer and scold him for not being normal as usual. The film unfortunately glosses over this element, so we can hear a voice saying how hot it is, as if this has any relevance to the plot whatsoever. What is established, however, in this scene is that not much has changed since we were last in Little Whinging. Harry still feels pretty lonely, awaiting his return to Hogwarts, as Dudley picks on him for not having parents. The change in atmosphere that occurs as the weather changes is quite effective. The colour tones that change from a beautiful summer day to a miserable British shower work effectively in changing the emotional tone of the scene. It feels very gritty and almost like something David Fincher would shoot, making Harry and Dudley's encounter with the Dementors very dark, but also allows the Patronus spell to shine out amongst the dull spectrum of the scene. Mrs. Fig then comes along to take the two home. Her purpose in the film seems rather pointless, considering she doesn't make any appearances prior to this film. In the book, her character is a lot more impatient and irritable, aggravated that Mundungus Fletcher, who disappeared from keeping an eye on Harry to purchase some stolen cauldrons, instead of stopping Harry from leaving the house. He, like many other members of the Order, do make appearances in the book as opposed to the film, but never seem to contribute much to the plot. When we return to the Dursleys, Harry receives a letter from Bethelda Hopkirk, who funnily enough is voiced by Jessica Hines from Spaced and Shaun of the Dead. I thought I'd point out that Harry gets more than one letter in the book, mainly telling him to stay put in the house, and even Aunt Petunia receives an owl from Dumbledore reminding her of her duty to keep Harry safe during the summer. Griffiths and Shaw once again produce great performances in reaction to Dudley's state of shock and Harry's expulsion. It's just a shame the film couldn't establish the reason why Harry needs to remain at the Dursleys for his safety. Even more irritatingly, Fig even states quite bluntly to Harry that he must remain indoors without an actual reason being given in the film. Yeah, I've been moaning about Harry being forced to return to the Dursleys in every Harry Potter video thus far, but I do think that in the 5th novel, Rowling finally gives us an answer. Right at the end of the novel, Dumbledore explains to Harry that his mother's love protects him from Voldemort, but it extends to the bloodlines too, in that Petunia, who shares blood with Harry and Lily, is able to offer the same protection to Harry. So as long as he is in her presence, or in her house, I'm not quite sure, he is safe from Voldemort coming along to kill him again. Yeah, it's flimsy, yeah, it's vague, but I'm quite satisfied with this outcome, and now you can stop bitching to me about why Harry has to stay at the Dursleys at the end of each year. There's also a long part of Dumbledore's chat to Harry that establishes why he kept this secret from him for so long, and that he felt after his duel with Voldemort that the time to tell Harry about all of this was now, despite being extremely hesitant, telling him previously for thinking Harry was too young to understand. On the one hand, it seems like a justification that Rowling didn't think of until writing this book, but on the other, it seems really plausible too. Young minds are very frail, and Harry has had a lot on his plate to deal with, so I can understand Dumbledore's viewpoint. After that palaver, the Order come along to pick up Harry, but it's very strange. The dialogue is exactly the same as when Harry was rescued by the Weasleys 3 years beforehand.
What are you doing?
Rescuing you, of course.
What are you all doing here?
Rescuing you, of course.
I would really like somebody to explain how Moody just summons all these broomsticks out of thin air, especially Harry's. You'd think it'd be up in his room, and if they were all going to be flying by broom, they'd tell him to just bring it down with him. He couldn't have agioed it to him as it just appears from the front of them and the house is behind them. They then take flight through London, and I really like this segment thematically, but it doesn't make much sense. The music that plays here is just superb. This is one of those fantastic tracks from Nicholas Hooper's score that is just awe-inspiring, but it doesn't quite fit the tone that was set up prior to their flight. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of adrenaline going through Harry's veins here, but Moody mentioned that they could die on the journey. In the book, they fly over the clouds until they're above their destination so they can't be seen by muggles, yet in the film they are seen flying through the River Thames in front of everyone. You'd think if Moody wanted to prevent the deaths of his allies, he wouldn't be flying around the River Thames where plenty of eyes could potentially see them. We then have a brilliant display of simple but effective special effects to reveal Grimmauld Place before we enter the house. We first of all see Kreacher tending to the house complaining about mudbloods, and this is basically all we gather from him after that. In the book he certainly has more of a purpose. For example, after being banished from the house, he assisted in feeding information to Bellatrix Lestrange that would eventually help in leading Sirius to his demise. He also has this strange obsession with serving Black's dead mother, who has a portrait permanently fixed in the house that screams when disturbed. Harry has a complainy chat with his friends that certainly feels a lot more justified in the books. Like I said previously, there's no mention of Harry desperately searching for some information about Voldemort's return over the summer, so his frustration in this scene is rightfully toned down a bit. In the book, he gets really angry at his friends, and his bitterness and anger becomes very recurrent throughout the book, as we are given plenty of details of what's going on in Harry's brain, but he wasn't. I know this is quite a frequent complaint I hear about the 5th novel, but I honestly don't blame Harry at all. I'd be pretty pissed off about it all, but you know, Dumbledore had his best interests at heart and couldn't risk Voldemort seeing him. Plus, teenagers are like that. Growing up sucks just as much as learning how shitty the world is as you get older. I think that this is certainly one thing this story tackles really well, both book and film, becoming an adult. We see the conflict between Sirius and Molly about how much Harry can know about for fear of how it might affect him, and also regarding how much Dumbledore can tell Harry as the years go by before he can be considered a man in the book. Anyway, before dinner, Fred and George appear and spook Mrs. Weasley.
We'll be eating down in the kitchen. Oh! Just because you're allowed to use magic now does not mean you have to whip your wands out for everything!
Wait, what? I thought they were in their final year. I'm not sure if apparition is different from wand magic or something like that, but how come Harry gets nearly expelled for using a Patronus charm, and yet they can zip around the building without a single complaint? I guess I'll find out when I read Half-Blood Prince, won't I? When Harry and Arthur take the Underground to the Ministry's meeting, we see Harry take out his Oyster card 3 times in a row before he lets Arthur get in. I think the music in this section is rather playful and adds to the comedy of Arthur's naivety towards the Muggle world. Man, the fucking set for the Ministry of Magic is just jaw-droppingly cool though. It's a similar feeling to that of when we first saw Diagon Alley, only this time it has a lot more dimensions to it. Diagon Alley had a very welcoming and enchanting feeling, like when a child walks into a massive toy shop. But the Ministry Atrium is something much more grandiose and businesslike. People are moving very quickly around the place. The sweeping shots of these magnificent archways, fireplaces, and the fountain just make it seem so damn big, but once again has that tone of secrecy, being hidden away from the Muggle world that's extremely enticing to watch. George R.R. Martin then makes an appearance with a box of dragons in the elevator, and Harry's hearing begins. If we look in the corner of the Wizengamot, we do see Percy, who in the book becomes Fudge's personal assistant and disowns his family to get said position. Later on, he would send his jumper back to his family, making Molly very upset, but also sends a letter to Ron whilst he's at school saying that he should stop affiliating with Harry Potter. It's a shame these parts weren't mentioned in the film, but this character is kind of forgotten about in the 3rd and 4th movies, so I don't blame the filmmakers for not making him such an important character here. Also in the book, Dumbledore magics a comfy chair out of thin air to sit on during the hearing, but the film does a great job at delivering this scene to us anyway. It's shot well and the performances are great, especially Michael Gambon. I really liked how Cornelius looked around the room when asked for those in favour of conviction, almost like a threatening stare to anybody who was unsure on the matter. It's great politically too, in that he would give any excuse to lock Harry up just because he disagrees with his narrative, but also could change laws to ensure he gets his way, and his character behaving like a stubborn child works well towards this idea too. Before going back to school, there's this really fantastic segment in the book where our main characters are seen cleaning Grimmauld Place. Mrs. Weasley tries to get rid of a boggart in a room, but we see her entire family dead on the floor, showing her worst fear is of the death of her family. Even more interestingly, Harry is seen on the floor too, meaning that she considers him a son also, which is really sweet. This section was quite emotional as Mrs. Weasley breaks down in fright and Harry just happening to be the one who finds her. It's a shame it wasn't included to further Molly's character. Something I'm happy that wasn't included though in the film is that Ron, Hermione, Draco and a bunch of other characters become prefects. In my opinion, it's a very small and unnecessary part of the story, considering Draco and friends outrank the prefects by becoming Umbridge's cronies later on in the story anyway. We are introduced to the Thestrals being a thing, and I don't get why Harry couldn't have just seen them earlier in the series. He saw his parents die. Oh, okay, well, as a very small child, yes, so I guess we can get away with this because, I mean, who can remember anything as a child, or a baby in fact? But what about Quirrell dying right before his eyes when he was 11? So yeah, if we saw them at the end of Philosophers or the start of Chamber, I wouldn't have much of a problem with this, but they're there now just to remind us of how much of an effect Cedric Diggory's death had on Harry. Luna's introduction makes a lot more sense in the book because she is introduced to the group by Ginny and not Hermione, who, as far as we are aware, has never encountered her once in the Harry Potter franchise until now. I haven't got much of a problem with Ivana Lynch being Luna. I think she did a pretty good job of portraying Luna Lovegood, and it's just a shame we don't see her get really creepy or angry like she does in the book. This not only could have enhanced her character, but could have also shown that Lynch could perform more than just being the weird, shy girl of the series. When entering the Great Hall once again, the inconsistency reigns supreme when Dumbledore says that Professor Grubbly Plank will be returning to take over Hagrid's position whilst he's away. To anybody who hasn't read the books, this piece of information is quite confusing as she hadn't made an appearance in the series until this film. More to the point, why was this even necessary to Dumbledore's opening speech? Harry would find out that Hagrid wasn't present eventually anyway, plus she isn't even teaching in this film at all. It's almost like the filmmakers didn't bother to look back on the mistakes they made in the past to improve them in the future. Whoever designed the costume for Umbridge needs a massive pat on the back. It's so ridiculously coloured and it is absolutely hideous to look at. As I said previously, Imelda Staunton's performance is one of the things that makes this movie work so well, and I don't say that lightly. If there was ever an actor or actress who deserved an Oscar from these films, it would be her performance as Umbridge. Her patronising tones complement her abhorrent personality and clothing choices, along with her irritating giggles and coughs that she creates throughout the course of the movie. This is just from her opening speech. I haven't even reached the finer qualities of her performance later later on in the film. I think this performance certainly makes her character one of the more highly prioritized elements of the film. My interpretation of her depiction in the book was less of a dictator and more of an arm for the Ministry to strangle the creativity and risk that happens within the school. Because the book is so long, her activities and control feel more like something that is just happening whilst Harry tries to figure out why he's constantly dreaming about the Department of Mysteries and passing his owls. This can be seen later on in the film. She is sat at the front of the hall, sipping tea, overseeing everyone arranged correctly and working in silence. Both methods are effective in their own ways, and I will certainly remember Umbridge more from the film than the book because of these reasons. In the following scene, we have some very poor audio mixing as the score and the music from the radio try to battle it out over what emotion the scene needs to feel. All they had to do was remove this Muggle music from the soundtrack and this scene could have worked a lot better. But for some reason we have this conflicting sound that just feels awful on the ears, in all honesty. Harry then has his first dream of entering the Department of Mysteries as Nagini, and as much as I feel the dreams are satisfactory in achieving the desired effect, the dream sequences in my opinion are very Hollywood-esque. Lots of images flash before us, becoming more and more rapid, and the music builds up and then Harry wakes up. I think the filmmakers could have pushed the dreams further by making them a lot more surreal. Crabbe proves himself the worst wizard ever in that he resorts to using a slingshot to take down that paper aeroplane instead of using his wand, and once again Staunton produces one of the most patronising pieces of dialogue in the film, with the music playing on this really well. The design of the front covers of the books is absolutely marvellous at portraying how young of age these books' target audiences are. In the book, Umbridge's classes are literally just them reading the book's chapters and nothing else, really emphasising how indoctrinating the Ministry has become towards students, as well as preventing them from thinking critically about the knowledge they're obtaining. She also sends Harry to McGonagall, who advises him to just simply avoid trouble with her at all costs, showing her loyalty to opposing the Ministry of Magic and ensuring Harry eats plenty of biscuits simultaneously. This segment, book and film, is excellently thought out, describing how important it is to teach the facts straight without political dogma, censorship, or dumbing down the subject matter. We then have that fantastic scene where Harry serves detention with Umbridge. In the book, Harry receives many more detentions than just this one, but I think that the imagery of the cats within the room works well in describing Umbridge's character. On the one hand, she's playful and friendly in her tone of voice and mannerisms, but on the other, she can use her claws, or in this case magical quill, to scratch and penetrate the skin. It's a really great metaphor that's used to its advantage in this scene. It looks so fucking painful, my own hand feels funny just watching this again. Staunton's flickering facial expression whilst this is going on is great. Her conflict between doing what is right and upholding the Ministry's reputation is seen as her smile wobbles and adjusts in reassurance. She gives such a great performance, I can't praise it enough. I don't really have much to say on the next scene containing the Thestrals, only that once again it's animated beautifully, and there is a really great piece of editing where the film cuts from a Thestral eating a piece of meat to Ron eating the same thing that's been packaged and cooked in a similarly savage way. We then have one of those beautifully constructed montage sequences that demonstrates Umbridge's influence on the school very effectively in a very small space of time. By this point in the book, we come to what I like to call the dreary middle section that took me the longest to get through because it's just so damn boring. This 2.5 minute section is so concise and effective in condensing the observed lessons that take place in the book that I have to take sides with the film in this case. Yes, some minor interesting details get missed, but this section is so well orchestrated because of how entertaining it is and its focus on Umbridge as a horrific nuisance on the school. We first see the media has taken everything out of proportion through these brilliantly edited shots of the Daily Prophet showing how successful she has become for the Ministry, followed by the ensuring of students following the new rules. If they don't obey, they'll be forced to by the High Inquisitor. The comedy of the scenes comes from these fantastically scripted and performed sections in the classrooms where we see Umbridge interrogating the teachers, with some of the most hilarious responses from Rickman and Thompson. The music that's played in this segment is absolutely sublime too, fitting very well in delivering the comedy at just the right times within the piece. I think that Nick Hooper's music overall certainly captures that playful and magical side to the Harry Potter world as proven here. I think the weakness is that it couldn't make anything extremely iconic, nor does it create any eerie atmospheres at any point. This probably isn't anybody's fault, nor is it the story's, only that it is pretty damn difficult to top the music scored for the first 3 movies by one of the Hollywood greats.
Something you'd like to say, dear?
Oh, there are several things I would like to say.
But unfortunately, the producers didn't like the idea of a 3-hour Harry Potter movie, despite this story is the longest of them all. Speaking of which, I thought I'd just explain some more of the stuff that was omitted from the film version of this story. Firstly, I certainly don't have a problem with there not being any Quidditch in the film, as I'm not a massive fan of it and doesn't really add anything to this story. However, it is interesting to note that after the first and only Quidditch match Harry plays in the book, he and George assault Draco Malfoy after insulting both their parents, giving Umbridge reason to ban them both from the team for the rest of the year. Ginny then becomes the Seeker in Harry's place and Ron joins the team as Keeper, which we would see happen in the next film. Secondly, after the sacking of Trelawney, Firenze, one of the centaurs seen in the first Harry Potter installment, takes over as divination teacher. This causes all of the other centaurs to be extremely mad with him, banishing him from returning to the forest. I'm unsure if more of this centaur subplot was meant to appear in the 3-hour cut of the movie, but his class that's depicted in the book is quite interesting, where he teaches in a classroom that Dumbledore transformed to look like a small forest. He disregards human theories of divination, claiming his own superiority as a centaur. This segment was rather funny, and it's a shame all the stuff about the centaurs wasn't as fleshed out as it could have been. Anyway, back to the film, shit really hits the fan when Dumbledore and Umbridge face off in front of all the students before Sirius turns up to have a chat with the trio. I think it's a shame they couldn't use the same effects they had for Sirius's fiery communication from Goblet of Fire here. This projected face onto the fire just looks very cheap and effortless in comparison, but also breaks the continuity between this film and the last slightly. In the book, Umbridge's hand comes through and stops the conversation, showing that she has control over the Flu Network too in a very horrific way. We then come to one of those unavoidably cringy moments where Hollywood dramatic lightning flashes and thunderclaps signal that a lot of pressure is going to be put on a certain character. This is followed by one of those fantastic transitions to signal the change of seasons before Harry has his little speech about how lucky he really is. This sheer honesty is portrayed really well by Radcliffe, which is quite surprising considering his track record of cringy performances he's given over the years. It flows really well and the music helps too, but it seems like a genuine performance too, which I really commend Radcliffe for doing after what he must have had to deal with in the last movie. The constant signs being put up and the tannoy of Umbridge's voice don't make an appearance in the book, but are very effective in demonstrating how tyrannous she is instead of multiple detentions with Harry and constant lesson examinations. Speaking of things being missed from the book, Dobby also makes multiple appearances that aren't of massive relevance, but he serves to show Harry the Room of Requirement and also warn him of Umbridge's attack on the room later in the story. Many would guess that the Room of Requirement is that location that Dumbledore mentions during the Yule Ball in the Goblet of Fire book that he found filled with chamber pots whilst needing the bathroom. This is hinted at also by Ron's comment,
So, say you really needed the toilet.
and this makes me quite happy to know that Goldenberg knew about this information whilst writing this script, paying homage to the fans of the books as well as the films. Once again, the second montage sequence of time passing by whilst the DA members get stronger and Filch becomes more nosy is really great. The cheeky and playful music once again works so well, but this time creates a very effective tone of rebellion that lots of teenagers have in their hearts at this time in their lives. Fuck school, fuck parents and such, but instead of being miserable and hiding away like most teenagers do these days, these ones are actually working to solve the problems they're having, which I really appreciate. It captures the spirit of youth really well and is once again very entertaining to watch. I would ordinarily complain about Filch's change in character again in this film, but it makes a lot more sense for this particular story, as Umbridge's influence can certainly make him a lot more feminine. Thus why he's no longer this scary madman who lurks the corridors at night with his cat whose relationship to his owner is relatively questionable. The sequence wraps itself up quite nicely with everyone applauding Harry for his hard work, especially Cho. I find this quite a charming moment considering how awful, particularly in the book, Harry's life has been over the past 6 months. The isolation, Umbridge and Voldemort's increasing activity and horrific dreams because of it is all forgotten for a few moments so he can be congratulated for what he's doing despite of it all. And my judgment of those novels will come when I reviews those installments along the first proper outtake. Thank you very much. It's just a shame the film couldn't establish the reason why Harry needs to remain at the Dursleys. Ooh, itchy nose. In my opinion, it's a very small and unnecessary part of the story, considering Jaco and friends. Jaco. Who the fuck is Jaco? In my opinion, it's a very small and unnecessary part of the story, considering Draco and friends outrang the prey. In the book, Harry's... In the... We then have one of those beautifully constructed montage sequences that demonstrates sucking cock. But unfortunately, the producers didn't like the idea of a 3-hour Harry Potter movie, despite this is a story and but are very effective in demonstrating how tyrannous she is instead of multiple detentions with Harry and constant lemon examinations. Hello, I'm Umbridge. I'm going to examine your fucking lemon. Oh, my legs. Oh.